Flosstube, welcome back. My name is Kathleen and this is Snickerdoodle Stitch, a channel about cross stitch. So first let me start out by thanking everyone for your kind comments and so many views and likes on my first video. I'm sorry I didn't mention it in my second video. I had actually already filmed it before my video really seemed to take off. I don't know that anybody will ever truly understand the YouTube algorithm, although they're fairly transparent about how it works. It's still somewhat of a mystery. But yeah, I started doing this really just with the thought that I'd connect with a few new stitchy friends, and to kind of just create a video diary of my stitching journey. When I look back at my pieces from 30 years ago, a lot of them I can remember where I was when I was stitching them. So that helps me place an approximate year or time, but I didn't keep very good records of when I finished things, and I'm terrible about remembering to put my initials in the year or anything at the bottom or somewhere on my stitching. So yeah, I thought this would just help me keep kind of a video diary of my work. So thank you. I'm glad everybody enjoyed the first video. This one is going to be a little bit different. I don't have any actual stitching to show. Hopefully that doesn't scare you off. I am filming this in advance because next week I will be in Toronto this time next week getting ready for Stitch North. So I thought I would share some tips on how to save some money cross stitching and do things in a way that's a little bit thrifty. So I am a big fan. I actually get high out of finding the bargain. And the funniest one was when I wanted a full roll, you know, kind of like a bale of warm and natural batting, and Joann's had stopped carrying it, and so there wasn't really a source to find it that was terribly cheap. So I started my Google search, and I actually found it at a ridiculously low price from a company here called officesupply.com. They sell office supplies. For some reason, they also sell crafting supplies, and they were significantly cheaper than anywhere else. And so I got my full roll of quilt batting from Office Supply Company. So anyway, I thought I would share some tips about how to save some money with cross stitching and with finishing, and give some tips on how to pick out some frames and so that you can frame items yourselves, which is a huge cost savings. Like I said in my first video, I only have a few pieces where I actually had a framer make the frame, and even then I did the actual assembly myself at that frame shop. But other than that, everything I stretch and frame myself, and it is very doable. But I have some tips on what will make that less painful if you want to give it a try yourself. I'm going to start with just some of my favorite thrift shop finds. So one thing that I always love to look at is antique linens, or yeah, I guess they would be antique now, even though I don't think of them as antique. But I love any of the hand-stitched linens. This was one of my latest finds, which I absolutely love. It's all hand-stitched, has a really nice hand crocheted edging on it. And my plan for this and the next one that I'm going to show is to make some project bags that don't have the clear plastic front like I normally do, but that have the more envelope front and are just a full bag. This one again has a really pretty hand crocheted edge. If I can get it to show maybe against my sweater. So this is a table runner. I got it super cheap because it has this horrible stain on it, but I would be cutting this middle piece out anyway and just using the two bottom edges. But I thought they would be so cute stitched down on a project bag on the flap. So I'm always looking. I actually like 1950s kitchen linens, and when I'm looking for those, I'll often come across hand-stitched things. So those were two of my latest finds. Another thing I have had good success at finding at the thrift stores are the scroll frames. This one had this piece of linen still in it, so I haven't pulled it out. It could be a little faded, I'm not sure, but I'm probably going to use it to play around with some hand dyeing at home. But this was $2 for the frame with what appears to be a full quarter yard of linen in the frame. So I think, you know, the thrift stores and Goodwill, people either don't know what these are or they do know, but if they're buying things for resale, the shipping on this may make them not as lucrative or as attractive to buy to resell. So I have had really good success finding these in the thrift stores. And I mentioned before, I do stitch in a frame or a hoop for large pieces. Having it in the scroll frame is my preferred method. The other thing I like to find is check out in the candle section, the candle holders. So this one was $2. It's about, I don't know, 5 inches in diameter. But how cute would it be to have a round finished, like a pin cushion? If you look in the stitching areas or stitch stores, they sell pieces just for doing rounds like that, you know, like the little tart tins and different things, and some of them are crazy expensive, and this was $2. So that's my plan for this. I'm always looking for round things that would work for finishing, because I can't just walk in a craft store or Goodwill any day and find a round piece. This is another one I picked up. It's wider, maybe like 7 inches, but isn't ridiculously big, which is the other problem I run into with round things, is that they're often so big that they wouldn't work for what I would be doing. But this one even has the hanger on the back. It's metal. Not sure if I'll keep it this color, if I'll spray paint it, but something will end up going in there. And I only paid $1 for that at the thrift store. So those are some of my favorite thrift store finds. Ikea is another spot. I had shown this finish, the JBW in the rounds. It's 1/1 on 25. It's upside down, which was the cats with the cording around. And this jar is like $3.50 at Ikea. And the top, you can't tell on this, so I brought one that I haven't put anything on yet. But the top is actually, this is just a piece of cardboard. I don't know if you can tell, it's actually recessed. So that stitchy piece, the cardboard actually rested down in there so it doesn't slide around, it doesn't move, it just makes it more secure. I did glue it down, like just a bead around the very outer edge under the cording. But yeah, $3.50, really nice airtight storage jar at Ikea. eBay and online. So we've all got our favorite sites to go to look for stitching things. It might be Etsy, destash sites, eBay. I would say don't forget good old-fashioned Google for a search. When I first got back into stitching last year, I wanted some silks, and I really just was looking to see, could I find a bundle somewhere, somebody destashing. And I had looked on Etsy, I had looked on the destash sites. I wasn't really seeing anything that I would say was enough of a bargain that I would just buy a bundle. It was close enough to retail price that I would just go to the store and support my LNS and pick out the colors that I wanted. And I do try to support my LNS whenever possible, so I will just get in a public service announcement now that if you are lucky enough to have an LNS or multiple ones like we are in this area, and you go in and you see something stitched up in there and you want that pattern, please buy it from them. Don't go home and buy it on the internet to save a couple dollars. Your LNS, you know, if we don't support them, they can't stay in business, and we will miss them when they're gone. So I've had some other hobbies where the internet kind of took over and took so much of their sales that they went out of business, and the entire hobby sort of went by the wayside because people didn't have that local inspiration. They didn't get to see things in person, and you really just can't replace that. So I'll get my plug in for our LNSs. But through just the good old-fashioned Google search, I just searched for silk, I don't know, silk lot or something like that. And this lot of Glorianas came up. It was 13 of them. I only paid $25 with shipping. and it was actually on Etsy, but it didn't come up on the Etsy search. It only came up in the Google search. And what I really liked about this lot and another lot that I'm going to show next is all of the colors, with the exception of this lime green, which I doubt I will ever use. So I'm planning to gift it to someone who I know that's their favorite color. All of the other colors were ones that I knew I would use in something. I mean, there's even a black in here. There's a nice dark brown. There's some good greens for leaves. It was just a super nice assortment and ridiculously cheap. But had I not jumped from Etsy over to Google, wouldn't have found that. So that's my Google plug. eBay. I bought this huge bundle of floss on eBay. I have heard that there are people selling counterfeit DMC floss on eBay, so I would use some caution shopping there. But this one had 175 DMC flosses. It also had these, which look like, you know, they're out of kits. There's some leftover or new, never used project cards, I'm not sure. And then it had like 12 overdyes in it, and it had a couple of the Whisper white fuzzy floss. So I was pretty sure this was not counterfeit. It definitely appeared to be some sort of estate destash, something like that. But I figured it was over $125 in flosses, and I only paid $30. I've already taken like 50 skeins of this floss and used it for different things. What attracted it to me again was all of the colors. See if I can get them out without creating a disaster. All of the colors were ones that I was likely to use. So there was a ton of greens in there. There was even some white and black and B5200. There wasn't anything crazy in here. And sometimes when you look at the destashes, it's sort of like all the crazy colors that you may or may not use. These, I had a strong likelihood that I would use all of these at some point. But yeah, I have heard that there are counterfeit ones on eBay, so that's my only word of caution there. I don't know if it's true or not, but best to be safe. And then I lost my floss that I brought in here. There you are. All right, I'll have to cut that out. And then another thing to be aware of with DMC, and I'm finding this even with my older stash since I have been stitching for so long, and I did have essentially a full set of DMC. The DMC tags originally looked like this. So they were both short paper wrappers, and they just had the big number stamped on the one end, short paper wrapper. The new ones that, if you haven't been stitching a long time, this is what you're used to. Looks like this. So the one end is the same, this end is the same, but this end now has this longer piece with the barcode. I mean, I'm sure that's what it was to accommodate. And they're also out of plastic now. But some of the die lots changed, and I read different things. It was frustrating me when I first started stitching. Some people speculating that it's really just the older floss color has deteriorated over time or been exposed to sunlight. That's another thing to watch out for if you're buying destash floss, is you don't know how it's been stored. If it has been exposed to sunlight, even newer floss can have faded. But mine I knew had been stored in a drawer out of sunlight, just zero sunlight. And I compared some of the older floss to some older patterns, and they match that color. So I think you can actually see that these two colors are not the same. They're both 318, but the newer one is this one. It is a much more purpley color. And if you saw 318 on a newer pattern, if you looked at the picture for the pattern, it is actually this more purpley color, and the older patterns are this color, which leads me to believe that the color actually did change. So the internet rumor, at least, is that it had to do with the EU changing some dye requirements for either health or environmental reasons, which that sounds plausible. It seems to mostly be with the grays and the reds. So if you're doing an older pattern, just know that it was likely charted with the older color more in mind, and if you're doing a newer pattern, it would be the newer color. Or like if I'm starting something and I have an old skein, I need to make sure that I have enough of it to finish what I'm stitching on, because I can't run to the store and buy a second skein or I'm gonna have a hot mess. It just isn't the same. It just isn't the same gray at all. The one is much more of a purple cast to it. So, floss tips. Let's talk about framing. So, most of my frames I get at either Goodwill or the big box craft stores. And I'll show you my requirements for when I'm shopping for frames. So, most of the ones in the big stores are going to have this kind of latch closure. So you put your picture in there, you pop this back on, and then this slides over to close. The downside with this kind of closure is that, you know, most of the frames in the craft stores or wherever with this kind of closure are really just designed to put a photograph in there. So super thin, essentially a piece of paper. And we are trying to frame often a piece of foam core, our fabric, maybe something behind it, maybe glass in front of it, maybe some sort of batting underneath the fabric if we're not using glass. So our piece is going to obviously be much thicker, and this kind of frame can be problematic. I did buy this one. I'm going to put the Quaker pumpkins in here. It is the right size, and the reason it will work, let me find the side that will show you. It's designed to hold 2 5x7 pictures, but it's designed so that they're almost in a recessed shadow box, and you can see if I turn it this way, that's actually like a piece of styrofoam or something in there that's holding this outer black matting up about 1/4 of an inch. So this frame actually will accommodate quite a bit of depth, and I don't plan on using the glass with the Quaker pumpkins because it'll only be up through the fall, so a few months a year. So it won't get too dirty with my gas heat. So looking for that that recess is one of the things I look for. And another tip, just familiarize yourself with the sizes of frames that are in your local stores. This 10 by 20 is actually, I found it in almost every one of the stores. The matting and stuff was different, but it seems to be a common size to hold 2 5x7 inch pictures here in the US. And I'll explain why you would want to familiarize yourself with the sizes in a minute. The other thing I look for is, so this is from a thrift store, and I'm always looking for pictures that are longer and narrower, because all of our photographs, even though they're rectangles, they're not, the proportions are different. So it would maybe end over here. So I'm looking for long and narrow, and then this label tells me that this was actually framed by a framer, which I can kind of tell from the outside of the frame. This is actually a cross-stitch piece, probably from the 80s, that was matted and framed. And the reason I'm looking for the ones that are framed by the framer is because this depth from the inside of the frame, so your glass or whatever would sit against this right the bottom here. The depth from there up to this very back is deeper, so it can accommodate those layers of pieces that I was describing earlier. This one I can actually tell from kind of pushing on it that it has a lot more room even that isn't used, and this has glass and it's matted, so this one's going to be perfect for something. I only ever spend a couple dollars for frames, and that lets me keep a stash of about 25 frames that I can go choose from. If you look at it, you know, 25 frames at $2 each, I've got like $50 in thrift store frames that I can just go check out and see if anything works for my stitching, and that's still less than what it would cost to take one piece of needlework to a framer to have it done. My exception where I will pay more than $2, this is an example. This came from a thrift store. She's cute. I almost hate to tear it apart, but it's double matted. So again, I know it's got some good depth to it, but what I really wanted was this. So this label actually tells me that this glass is gallery glass, that it will provide UV protection, and that glass is ridiculously expensive. When I did the Quaker sampler, it's 16 by 20, and I had the frame, it had glass with it, but I wanted some UV glass because that hangs in an area of my house that's full sun all day, every day. And the 16 by 20 piece of UV glass was like $40. So I'm always on the lookout in the thrift stores for artwork that doesn't look at all faded, and then I can take a peek at the back and see if I can tell if it has this kind of glass in it. So cutting glass is relatively simple with just a little mechanical glass cutter. I like the frame on this one too. It's a different gray color that I didn't have in my stash. It's bigger than what I likely would use a lot, but last tip on framing. So I'm going to use this as an example because this just came up in my real stitch planning this week. I want to stitch these cats from Jardin Privé. It's called Tea Break. I'm going to take it to Stitch North. It's going to be my stitch project there. And I'm changing the colors of the teacups a bit. I want more of a teal and a red instead of the pink and the olive green. Although I love these colors. I'm going to make it match my kitchen a little more. So this pattern, let's say, and I've changed these numbers a little bit just for simplicity's sake, but this pattern, let's say, is 5 by 9. So if I were cutting my fabric, I would normally add 2 inches for each side, so that would make it 9 by 13. But I went in the basement, sorry, that's where I store all my frame stash, and I had this down there. So this I had bought. I did break my rule and paid a little bit more for this because it is so long and narrow, and that's really hard to find. And it is also double matted, so it's got plenty of room to accommodate all those layers that I was talking about. But this frame is 8 by 14. So if I cut my fabric to 9 by 13, it wasn't going to work in this frame. So I would have finished my needlework, then gone and looked at my frames, and then gone, well, shoot, if I had made that fabric 2 inches longer, it would have worked in this. So I'm always bouncing back and forth and kind of trying to think when I'm first planning my stitching, what different thread counts are going to give me what different sizes. And then in a lot of cases that will drive my thread count as well as what size I cut my fabric. I don't usually work on like the full fat quarter or anything just because I don't want to fight with, I don't want to deal with holding on to all that fabric while I'm stitching. I like to get my fabric cut down as small as I can so there's just less to deal with. So it is sort of a back and forth process between, you know, what's my pattern, what are my different stitch count sizes going to give me, what frames do I have, or what's a standard size frame. Another example for that was the Snow Clown from Teresa Kogut, and 28 count fabric made that one exactly 4 by 6. So that drove my decision to use 28 count fabric. So that's sort of my process. Once I pick out my pattern, I start thinking about, you know, what count do I want it to be on? Now, obviously, if I want it to be really tiny on like a 48 count, then that's just the decision. But if it's something where I could go 28, 32, 36, I don't really care. Then I start to look at, okay, what sizes are they going to end up being? Is any of that getting close to a standard frame size or a frame size that I have in my stash? And then once I decide that, then I come back and say, okay, then this will be my thread count, and this is what size I need to cut to use the frame that I have in my stash. So that's just some tips about frames, having frames on hand. I know you can cut frames down I'll be honest, it's really hard to do at home and have them look really, you know, really professional and neat on the corners. And I don't want them to look like I framed them myself. So I don't generally cut my frames down. I forgot to, another thrift store thing that I like to shop for, although this is more of an antique store. So I mentioned that I like to display my pieces in milk glass, and this is what I mean by milk glass. I do know milk glass comes in different colors. In the US, this is what people tend to think of, is this white glass that was very, very popular in the 50s and 60s, and probably most people my age, our mothers may have had some of this in the stash that was wedding gifts. I know my mom had milk glass. I like it just because it's very clean and simple and works even today. It's timeless because it is just white. These are not cross stitched. These are little quilted pin cushions. So one of my local quilt stores used to have a weekend retreat twice a year, and Miss Andrea from Miss Andrea Quilts was the host for them, and each retreat she made everybody a pin cushion, and so this is a collection of my pin cushions, except this one I made. And so I just display them in this milk glass bowl, but milk glass is made in the general area that I live in, the kind of mid-eastern states. Fenton glass and Westmoreland glass were both here, and they're the popular ones. So my really funny story, this has nothing to do with stitching, sorry, but in my search for milk glass, I'm in Goodwill, which is a thrift shop here in the US, and I spot a piece of milk glass, and I can tell from it and from the bottom that it's Fenton glass. I know that typically the cheapest you're gonna find them is gonna be about $15, and this was $1.50. And I was so excited. I was like, oh, that is wonderful for like pickles, relish, you know, just little serving dish kind of thing. So I get it home. I'm all excited with my $1.50 purchase. I start looking online because I'm just curious how much it is actually worth. Some milk glass is much more expensive. They can be up to $60 or $80 for a bowl. So I start looking for it, and yeah, I'm a total dope. Thinking back that, you know, this was really big in the 1950s, 60s. It is the biggest ashtray known to man. So what I thought was an hors d'oeuvre serving tray is actually a ginormous ashtray. Not sure what I'm going to do with this now, but that's my funny thrift store. If you don't know what you're doing, you can get yourself in trouble story. Going back to this, I'm going to switch gears again and talk about fabric dyeing and a way you can save some money there. I wanted the really pale pink fabric similar to what is here in this pattern, and I didn't have any in my stash in the thread count that I wanted, but I did have some white fabric that I had got on I think it was just from a local hobby store, but it's Weigart. And so I dyed it myself to get that pale pink. It has some modeling. You can maybe see it up here. It doesn't show really well on the camera. It's very subtle though, and that's what I wanted. I like dyed fabric to complement my stitching, not be the showpiece itself. So I like really light, subtle colors. And my tip for how to do that cheaply is tie-dye kits. So they're big for sale right now. They sell them in the spring, I think, for people to use for keeping the kids entertained over the summer and for summer camps, you know, whatever. They're very popular this time of year. I guess everybody's wearing t-shirts now too. But what I like about them, they look like really bright, crazy colors, but I get this whole assortment of 12 different colors, and it was under $15 for the 12 colors. And if you buy something like a bottle of RIT dye, you know, even with a coupon, you're looking at like $4, and then you've got this big bottle to store. And if all you're wanting is that pale color, you only need a few drops. The other advantage to the tie-dye is that it's generally made to be very simple to use. So It's as simple as dyeing, drying, heat setting, and then washing. That's it. There's no like additional processes to set the dye or anything like that. But it has really nice colors. And all I did to get that pale pink, I used this bowl. I scrunched up my fabric in there. It was wet because I rinsed it out first to get any sizing out of the fabric. Scrunched it up in there, filled this little cup with water, and then put 15 drops of the pink dye in the cup, and I poured it over top. I let it soak in here for a couple hours, and then put it on just a cheap aluminum pan. Put it in the oven at 250 for 5 minutes. It could have been in there longer, but I'm really paranoid about burning the fabric, scorching it. I've done that before, so I really just put it in long enough that it would dry it out enough that then I could pull it out and spread it out without dripping this dyed water all over the place. So then I ironed it to heat set it, and it appears to be completely color fast. I rinsed it after that and nothing came out, and then I ironed it again. But tie-dye kit, super cheap way to get lots of different colors of dye to try out. If you wanted a really bright color, like a deep color, you could just use this straight. It just might use the whole bottle. But I just wanted something to do those soft, just a hint of the color and modeling. And that's a really cost-effective way. I did not find the same kit this year, but I did find in Michael's, they now have up by the registers where they have those bins with different things that are like $1 and $2. And there's stuff there for impulse buying. They have, it's the same brand, and it's a set of just 4 different colors, but they had, I don't know, 5 or 6 different sets of the 4 colors. It doesn't have the water in it, so it's not pre-mixed, but it's easy enough to add the water in. Or you can buy the tie-dye kits on Amazon. I saw them there, a lot of different ones as well. I just can't speak to how color fast those ones are. This one I've tried, and I rinsed it out, and at least the pink color is color fast. Different colors may react differently, so we'll see if I go to do blue or something completely different than pink. Shifting gears again, cording. So this was the flat fold that I had done of the out of print Blackbird design, following Vanna Pfeiffer's tutorial. And can I say, she found my first video somehow. I was floored when I was responding to comments and realized I wasn't really reading who they were from. And all of a sudden I realized that I was replying to Vanna Pfeiffer, and I had a fangirl moment because her finishes are phenomenal, and it was her tutorial that I used to do this flat fold. But for the cording, so here's my money saver on that, money and time saver. Cryonique sells, and I'm guessing some other companies may sell, the little thing that you hook your thread on, and then you crank and crank and crank to get it to do the spinning. I don't have that tool, and I already have a house that's being overtaken by craft hobbies because I have way too many of them. So I didn't want to buy another tool to have to store, so I got out my drill, and my trick is, so my drill has, I have this adapter on here so that it's easier for me to take the bits in and out. But I tied my thread around here and my other end to a doorknob. So that piece is similar to, you know, I'm just tying it on here instead of that little Cryonique tool, and then just crank it. And it twisted in like 60 seconds. I was done. But it was twisting on such high speed that I can't imagine how long you're actually standing there cranking to get this much long of a piece of cording twisted the way you need it to. So, because that was like 180 inches of thread twisted there down to this size. Yeah. So my only advice there is, when you tie it on, just be careful when you start out start your drill slowly so that you're sure it's not getting pulled into your shank or anything here. You don't want to mess up your drill, or else you're really not saving yourself any money or time. But yeah, use an electric drill to make your cording super fast, and you don't need a second tool at home. I have 2 tips left, and these may be specific to the US. So I shared that I like to make my own project bags, and Andrea, actually, the one who hosted the quilting session that gave us the pin cushions, got me started on this company. It's called wawak.com, and they sell all kinds of different sewing materials. I did notice just recently, if you serge your fabric, they have great price on serger thread as well. But what I love them for are the zippers for my project bags. So the standard number 3 size zipper, so just a regular nylon zipper. An 18-inch one, for example, if you bought 10 zippers, and you could buy assorted colors, is only 33 cents. And that would be picking from all of these different colors. If you prefer a handbag size zipper, a 4.5, which is a heavier duty zipper, and it usually has the larger pole and a hole in the pole, so it will accommodate more of your fancy like scissor fob, things with a lobster claw clasp on them. They don't come in quite as many colors, but they have a tremendous amount of colors here. An 18-inch for them was 77 cents, I think. 79 cents if you bought 10 zippers. The additional tip for that is if you sign up for their email, they periodically have all of their zippers buy one, get one free. Now, those 2 do have to be the same color. But yeah, buy one, get one free, and they're under $1 to begin with. The cheapest you're gonna find a zipper at the like sewing craft stores is about $2, and that's with a coupon or a buy 2 get 3 or whatever. They're gonna be about $2, and then I'll occasionally see them in thrift stores for $1, but they're usually too short and they're ugly colors. This way you get to pick out which beautiful colors you want yourself. So wawak.com, that's my recommended source for those. And then, like I said, I just noticed, and I've got to do a little bit more digging in that they have some serger thread that's a great price. So another thing they carry. Very last thing, if you've ever had any interest in any of the Better Homes and Garden Christmas books, and I don't know if they still make these or not. This one's old, I can tell from the picture. It's a little dated, but here's a cute Santa. I'm just showing the covers, but there was something that I liked in every one of these. I've seen them on the D-Stash sites for $20 to $25, but there is an online book reseller. They buy books and sell books. I think it's actually different sellers under the same umbrella, but the site is called Abe Books. So Abe, like Abe Lincoln, books.com, and these books on there are selling for like $4.25 with free shipping. So I got all 6 of these for like under $25. I think it was more like $21 for all 6. And yeah, for $4, that's cheaper than a magazine and fun to flip through. And they did each, you know, some of the patterns in them are very dated. Things cross-stitched on sweatshirts and some things like that. But I'm looking to see if there's anything here I can show without trying to avoid the patterns. Like, I really like this poinsettia wreath. They all have stuff on the back, no, just that one. But yeah, abebooks.com, great source. The shipping is not super fast. They may have even shipped media rate. which is slower than first class. But you know, they came well packaged, undamaged, and it's not like I had to have them. So I'm okay with waiting as long as I have that expectation up front that I'm gonna have to wait. But yeah, they sell all kinds of they have other cross stitch books too. They don't sell patterns. It is truly just books that have the ISBN number in them. But yeah, that's everything that I have for today. Hopefully next time I'm filming, I will have wonderful stitching and stitchy haul to show from Stitch North, and maybe I will meet some people there. So thank you again for watching, and hopefully you picked up some tip here that will help you save some money so you have more money for floss and fabric and patterns and all the other stitchy good things. So happy stitching. We'll talk soon. Bye.